Alright guys, welcome back. GM Light here. We have Halloween coming up, so I figured I would give you 5 movies to not waste your time on this Halloween season. Movies that are bad, movies to avoid, terrible sequels, any of those. So let's get into the list. At number 5, I'm gonna include this movie, Scarecrow Slayer. This is one of the shittiest movies I've ever seen, and although it's probably the worst one on this list, it's probably the lowest because although it's really awful, I think that there's the right setting. There's beers involved if you have buddies to crack jokes with. Maybe you could have a good time with this movie, maybe something about it you could get out of, but overall it's very terrible, low quality, really bad CGI. I don't know how they roped Tony Todd into being in this movie. Someone must have had some kind of favor with him or something, because this is a really bad, low quality, straight to DVD horror movie. It's just so stupid. All the deaths are pretty stupid, and there's a lot of bad acting, bad effects and CGI, stuff like that. It really is just some of the worst stuff to come out of the early 2000s. I get a laugh out of it still, I have some nostalgia for it, but this movie is a piece of dog shit and you should definitely avoid it. But I will have that caveat that there is some potential enjoyment to be had just out of how bad it is. Now for number 4, Jeepers Creepers 3. This is a god-awful, terrible sequel, one of my least favorite sequels in movies really to exist. I'm probably putting it a little bit on the lower end of the list too, because it might be more competently made and potentially more watchable, but I just find the decisions, ultimately the writing, and just the downgrade from the second movie to be so catastrophic that I really don't like this movie and don't get much out of it when I watch it. What you have is basically just this weird shoehorned prequel that takes place during the Creepers cycle in between 1 and 2. Just so dumb on so many different levels, and it doesn't make sense in the context of these two movies. It basically breaks so much continuity and steps on so many toes in that time that it really makes no sense, has no business being a part of it. The guy who gets on the bus at the end of the third movie isn't in the second movie, so I don't even know why the hell that would be included. It just doesn't make sense. And besides that, you have the idea of just a huge missed opportunity. The second movie sets up a really good sequel, one that involves the Taggarts, one that involves Trish, people that have lost people because of the Creeper, want revenge and want to kill him once and for all. And you could have had a really great cap off to this trilogy if you followed with that, kept the same cool effects from the first two. And this is just kind of a tough situation because no one really wanted to give the director anything because he turned out to be a really terrible person. But I'm talking purely creatively with just what at the end of the tunnel, what we got. It's just a bad fucking movie and misses the mark in so many different ways. So number 4, I'm gonna have Jeepers Creepers 3. Number 3, Bring It On, Cheer or Die. This movie was fucking garbage. I hated it. I watched it a little bit earlier this year and just found it to be one of the most unwatchable horror movies I've ever seen probably in my life. Despite being 90 minutes long, it's an absolute slog to get through. I find it to be ultimately just so fucking boring, annoying. I really don't like it. There's not even much to say about it because I feel like I forgot everything during that movie. Very generic villain, very generic twists, PG-13, so you don't even get anything great out of the kills. It took me like 3 whole days to watch because I remember getting through like the first half hour and being like, fuck, this movie is like lasting forever. It's honestly terrible. So with that, I will have to say I cannot not recommend this movie enough. As for number 2, this is going to be All Hallows Eve 2. This is a really not good movie. I don't enjoy it very much. Where All Hallows Eve is a very interesting concept, it kind of flips things on its head, especially in regards to anthologies, by having this through line of Art the Clown sprinkled throughout the whole thing, connecting it all, tying it together to be just an interesting kind of cult movie that I think is starting to get a little bit more appreciation now that Terrifier 2 was a huge hit. The sequel is just, it seems like a fucking cash grab that just, they threw together some shitty horror shorts together. They made this 2-minute kind of clip of a jack-o'-lantern killer in between where it's just the TV goes off, it goes fuzzy, and then you see his face for like 2 seconds, and then that's supposed to be on the same level as all the stuff Art the Clown did in the first movie. Art the Clown had such a presence. He was felt throughout the entire movie, and he was ultimately the best part of that movie. He actually had screen time and presence. This jack-o'-lantern killer has no presence at all. They give him no screen time. It's just a lazy way to kind of connect these stories and find a way narratively to not just cut from one short to to the next, when they might as well have done that. Really, there wouldn't be any difference. If they did that and put them together, this could have been Tales of Halloween 2. This could have been VHS 8. This could have been anything. It really didn't make a difference or matter at all. Well, I guess it couldn't be VHS because it's not found footage, but you know what I mean. It's just random horror shorts put together. They try to copy the formula of the first movie with this jack-o'-lantern killer. It does not work at all, and they don't give it anything earned. So it ultimately is just a movie that I don't revisit. I will take All Hallows Eve, Terrifier, Terrifier 2 any day of the week over this movie. So that's going to be number 2. But for number 1, pretty much what I think to be the most bland, boring horror movie that for some reason these things make a lot of money despite how generic and bland they are. I'm talking about The Nun. What I dislike about this movie so much is that it's really it's so successful for absolutely no reason. This is a movie that dumbs down horror. It's a movie that relies on cheap jump scares. They're stupid, they're cheap movies. This is kind of a microcosm for the bad of the spin-offs of the Conjuring movies. I like the Conjuring movies. I like especially the first 2 a hell of a lot. But as they go along, they make these spin-offs. They feel like the Marvel of horror movies. At least Marvel since Phase 4. Rather than being creative, fun movies, they just feel like cheap corporate products that make as much money as possible. They make a hell of a lot of money off of teenagers and that audience, but they really just have no value. They're soulless, they're hollow, they're boring, and they bring nothing to the genre. I also have a little bit of a gripe against it because it comes from New Line, and they probably have the best odds of being able to get a Freddy movie made, but instead of giving us a new Nightmare on Elm Street, or even really any other horror movies, they just rely on this cheap, safe franchise that puts out some of the worst horror movies that reinforce this stigma surrounding horror movies and continue to tell studios that lazy horror movies are okay to make. It sends off all the wrong messages as a horror movie, and then on top of that, just as an experience, I would feel robbed if I spent my Halloween watching this piece of shit. I don't know anybody who actually likes this movie, and maybe I'll watch The Nun 2 out of some kind of obligation or just to keep current. Even if a movie I think is going to be bad, I still try to watch it and give it a fair shake and see what I think and form my own opinion. If nothing else, I'll probably want to watch The Nun 2 because if I don't like it, I could include it on my top 10 worst of the year. But besides that, it's just really nothing there. Boring, soulless, corporate. I don't like the movie, and that's why it's number 1. But that's just my opinion on 5 horror movies that you should avoid at all costs this Halloween. I guess there's really no particular order, and there's no rhyme or reason to why I picked these. They're probably not my 5 worst horror movies ever made or anything. I've definitely seen way worse just off the top of my head. This is what I could think of. So avoid these movies at all costs, or not. If you have some drinks, maybe you could make it work, but that's just my opinion. Have you seen any of these movies? Let me know in the comments section. I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.